It's in progress.
Well, it's not anymore. It's now started. We have officially started. There's nothing official about
Officially.
it, but
It's about as official as we get here.
yeah.
Hello, everyone who is still here.
Who's still here? They've just arrived. If someone's new and they've just turned up and you're like, still here, I've just arrived. I'm leaving now. I'm gone.
You're probably not the right person for this podcast.
Yeah.
To be frank, that's probably not the right person for this podcast if you come in and get put off immediately by coming in the door. Hello. Welcome. How are you today? Are you doing good?
Yeah, I am. Thanks.
Yeah, welcome. I wasn't really talking to you, but it's fine.
No, you're talking to like people that haven't watched this yet. That's who you're talking to or listened to this yet.
See, yeah, shush.
You're talking to a prediction of the future. That's what you're
Yes. Oh, that's deep, isn't it? That's
doing.
very deep at 9:30 in the
Well,
morning. Just for that. It's like deep stuff.
that's how my brain starts the day. I'm like, oh, I just woke up. Let's talk about Bayesian statistics and prediction errors. Yay!
Wait till you have kids. Just you'll lose it all.
Am I awake yet? Is this a dream? Is it a hallucination? What's going on? Where am I?
Sometimes it feels like that. It's true. It's very, very true. So, what are we talking about today, Danny?
Depth of level of understanding is the title that we've currently got. It will probably change slightly because I don't think it rolls off the tongue very well, but yeah, depth of understanding.
Yes.
Yes.
I like
So
that.
when I came up with this title, I came up with a title because of depth of understanding as part of my research, and then I realized actually there are I thought this was going to be an easy thing to research as PhD, like going to be completely upfront. I was like, understanding, that sounds like an easy topic. Hell no. Yeah, yeah. PhDs are great fun, but like I thought one word would mean one thing. No, it really doesn't.
Have you
Um,
not learned anything?
well, yeah, but I thought understanding. Oh, that's probably just a bit of Bayesian stats, a bit of cognitive psychology, and then a little bit of pedagogy. No, it's literally a bit of everything and then a bit of nothing at the same time. And I figured, let's have a conversation about that with John.
Yay! Yeah. So I'll be coming at it from kind of the understanding of yourself for productivity. A lot of what my work entails is going pretty deep into the psychology of you and understanding how you work from different angles, not just from the kind of psychology, but also the almost the physiology, how you function, how you work, and things you do and why you do them, like loads of different angles that I take my work from. So it's gonna be really interesting to see the similarities and the differences between what I do and then the consumption of content which you've got there. Very
Yeah.
intrigued.
So the reason I've got consumption of content as a point, I'm pretty sure we were like talking about different ideas we could talk about, and you put that down because you got D in brackets, and I'm like, why did I say that? And then I remembered. I was like, oh yeah, that's and it's funny. The cue that reminded me of that shows that I have a lower depth of understanding of whatever it was that I was talking about at the time, and that's kind of where the consuming content came from. When I consume content, I don't consume content once most of the time. I consume it multiple times to try and get a better depth of understanding of the content. But most people, from my experience, don't. I mean, when I look at my YouTube stats, some videos are watched 2, 3, 4 times by viewers. Other videos are watched once. And knowing a lot of the YouTube stats of other people and other creators, because I watch those videos when they share their stats, they're normally sharing money, and I don't really care about that. I care about the others, the other stats that are on the screen. Viewer retention, viewer replay is normally around 1.2, 1.3 per video, which is normally
Wow.
where, yeah, which is pretty pants. So basically, people watch a video. Most of the time, they don't watch the whole video. They watch 30%, 40%, and then that's it. And you're done. Then they leave it. Some people go back and watch certain sections of videos to understand things. That's the 1.2, 1.3 bit. But most people watch a video once. And the majority of people looking at audience retention of most videos don't go beyond 40 or 50%. just average on YouTube. So it makes me wonder if, well, it doesn't make me wonder. It kind of like confirms that people watch something and either don't like it, don't agree with it, or just are bored for whatever reason, and then leave it again. And you're like,
I
what?
wonder. I don't think I completely agree there. I I'm wondering whether it's just the platform that it's on, YouTube. I know you and I may be a little bit of the outlier in this, but I watching YouTube for learning, I don't know whether the vast majority of YouTube is really outside of tactical, which obviously, how to do this in this app. That is very tactical and practical. But I think when it comes to the more higher level kind of conversations around strategy and rather than tactics, when it comes to the strategic elements of how our brains work, or like how to run your YouTube channel, or how to manage this or manage that, and how to think about this, how to manage the data points, stuff like that, which is much more strategic rather than tactical, how to do this, how to do that. I think perhaps people on YouTube aren't looking for that.
I think that's a reflection of the views. So obviously the strategic higher order learning, if I don't like that term, but I'm going to use it. That those sort of videos get lower views, but
That is the English language in one go. I don't like it, but I got to use it. It makes sense. Off we go.
yeah, I don't like it, and I may explain why in a bit, but yeah. So I think that reflects views, not necessarily duration, because some of the videos that I know from Veritasium and Smarter Every Day, they are more theory based videos, because they're not telling you how to do something. It's just, hey, these are loads of theories of stuff that can challenge your way of thinking. Vsauce is another perfect example, where he does a video like, that's really interesting, and starts critiquing himself and or critiquing the viewer, whatever's going on. But again, most of those videos only have, well, actually they're a 0.95 from memory serves, so people don't even watch the entire video. They leave before, and people don't go back to rewatch it to bring up that stat. So it seems, for whether it's just YouTube, I don't know, but I guess I would then extend that to how many people reread an article, how many people re-listen to a podcast or re-watch a video in a course. I don't know those stats, but I can't imagine it being very high for a lot of people on average. I don't know though.
I think rereading something or re-consuming the whole entire thing, as someone who consumes a lot of courses, no, I probably wouldn't. I think I do. I'm kind of in that 0.2% that rewatches things a few times just to get a deeper level of understanding. Yes, but in courses and articles, I feel like the going deeper on the understanding comes from the notes that I'm taking and connecting them to other ideas rather than the consumption of that content again. I consume the content until I've had enough. If it's a very surface level, shallow depth of understanding, I'll watch it once, go through it, take my notes, and then the depth comes from connecting it to other ideas. For me, my depth comes from connection of other ideas that drags me down the rabbit hole. A good example of this is when I did the neuroscience of flow. I learned about the three parts of the brain that kind of, simplifying grossly, the three parts of the brain that kind of manage that and support that, and the systems behind that. And then I went down a whole rabbit hole of how each part of that brain works, the CEN, the SEN, etc., etc., etc. Just because I wanted to learn. My depth comes from connecting notes together versus watching something again.
So I'm curious, how did you find that information out? When you were going down into the depth, how did you find it out? Because depending on your meanings and definitions of what understanding is and what knowledge is, connections are essentially the most important part of differentiating between shallow and deep understanding. So I'm glad you said that. I was like, yes, don't have to sort of talk about that. But how do you go further down? Is it just you read another article about that one question you have?
Yeah, I just follow the questions. I follow the dopamine. Basically, it's just like, oh, cool, this is cool. So there's an LCN. What is that? Oh, what does that do? Oh, I wonder what else that affects. Oh, I wonder what this does. Oh, I wonder what that does. And I just follow the depth down. And then by going deeper into a specific part of it, it very beautifully links back up to the original thing that I was wanting to talk about and gives me some understanding. So a good example of this was understanding how the default mode network work varies for people who are neurotypical to neurodivergent. So I found out about what the studies that were talked about, whether they're all right or not, is another conversation with neurodiversity because that is such a complicated thing to jump into. But whatever. Like understanding how the default mode network is slightly bigger or more active, so to speak, in people who are neurodiverse, because which is why staying focused and getting into stuff really deep is really easy, but you can very easily be pulled out and distracted and pulled around. That's where the hyperfixation can come in.
Oh, yeah. So I spoke about that briefly in the Patreon and some of the explorations around things. So I'm going to leave that for now though, because that may
Yeah, I know.
that
I have a lot of I have a lot of issues with the medical ADHD and autism community that I'm just not touching because every time I start touching it, I'm just like, I hate you. This is just stupid. I know I can intellectually I can understand, but it's like, yeah, you're missing so many things that are actually more important.
I guess what I would say there is ecological validity of some of their testing is not as good as it could be, which obviously
Mm.
is difficult, especially in lab testing if you want to get actual answers. It was so for those that watch YouTube, you may have come across a couple of videos from Justin Sung, I believe his name is, who's also an educational science researcher who's shared his opinions on certain things. I don't agree with his opinions, and I don't agree with his interpretations of some of the research that he's read. And one of the things that he brought up was about sort of this interpretation, and I was like, so he essentially said that spaced repetition is not useful and the research can't be applied to a modern student because the studies are not ecologically valid. He didn't say ecologically valid, but that was the point he was trying to make. He made it in like 3 minutes, but he could have just said ecological validity. Yeah, one of my personal gripes with it. He outstretches the video. But anyway, and the point was that studies weren't accurate enough to what life is like now. My argument would be you can't make it accurate in a study when you're looking for a specific significance because you need to be able to control the factors. So what do we know? Spaced repetition is useful. Yes. Is it useful in every single context? Yes, but for differing degrees. So what he said isn't wrong, but it's not right, but it's misleading to what could be
Misleading, I
helpful.
think. I think not wrong or right is the kind of wrong terminology. Misleading is better
Yeah,
because it's wrong and right at the same
exactly.
time. Especially like as I'm learning more about as I'm diving deeper into the research of our brains, I'm just like, yeah, we don't know shit. It's just like, yeah, we don't know shit. Everyone's arguing, nobody is happy, and we just got to figure it out ourselves.
It's funny because there's so many times where I'm reading something, I'm like, oh, and then it's like future research needs to. I'm like, oh, we haven't found the answers yet. But going back to what we were saying about the shallow and depth of sort of like finding and exploring a question, I wonder because this is what sort of something that I realized, which is why I go back to watch some of the things again, is once I have answered some of those questions, when I rewatch one of those videos that has some level of depth, some of the videos I watch are pretty pants and shallow in depth, so I know I'm not going to go watch them again, depending on the creator. But some of the creators, when they explain a video, I listen to the video and I take points. I'll take 4 or 5 points, and then I'll go explore it. But then when I go watch it back, I recognize other points and other links because I now understand what they're talking about better, which is why I go back and rewatch. And I wonder, have you done that at all? Or
Oh, that's a good point. I mean, most of the stuff I consume is book related, and I think I do make more notes than you do. Like from what I've seen from your Obsidian and my
mm,
Obsidian, like my notes are more somewhat summarization, sometimes not. Like there's a balance between the two, whereas you're just like, here's a connection to an idea I have. Here's a thing they said that's cool. Like, whereas I'm like, oh, I want to think about that. And so I think I take the bits that I don't understand and put that in my Obsidian when I make the note. I think perhaps I don't know whether that's any different, but when there are things I don't understand, I put it in there to explore and to think about. And when it brings it up again via my Readwise, or if it's a book, or a podcast, or something like that, or if I'm just looking at it again, I don't often. I think for my YouTube consumption, I very rarely use YouTube for learning.
Mm.
I think that's where we differ.
What would you say you use for learning?
Books, courses, just
How do they differ?
articles.
What do you do differently?
That's a good question, which I don't have a good answer to. I think it's the intention. If the intention is clear on YouTube that I'm doing it to research and learn something, I approach it differently, I think. I think that's what it is. But I find myself relying more on articles than videos. Articles and podcasts more than videos. For my own personal learning.
So, question for you then. Would you say that your level of learning, i.e., depth, so shallow or deep level of learning, is impacted by your intention? And if so, would you then say YouTube is kind of like a shallow level of learning?
Yeah, I think I would say that.
Yeah. The way I see it is social media is the top of the funnel. It's where I get exposed to most of the questions, the ideas, the thoughts, whatever. Wikipedia is not social media, but it's another one of those top of the funnel. It's, okay, this is a page. I'll have a look, see what's going on, and go into the references. And then for a deeper understanding, you want more nuanced information about that thing, which is normally where you go
Research
to the
papers,
articles.
articles. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that's where I am now with my learning, because I don't have enough time to watch tons of videos that I don't get any value from. Even at 3 times speed, I'm just like, yeah, okay, cool, whatever, 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 whatever. And I was just getting to the point where I was just pressing that all the time, and I got bored, and so I wouldn't do it anymore. So instead, it's like, oh, cool, someone's talking about this thing, this concept, or I spoke with Danny, and this is something that I want to look into. I go and look into it. A lot of my depth of understanding comes from conversations with others, in fact, which I think is, I didn't think about that until now, of like, when I want to go deeper, it's a conversation I have with people, because I'm very much a, can't think of the proper term, so talky learner. Like when I talk things out and I process things out loud.
Verbal?
Thank you. Verbal processor. So when I talk out loud, that's literally what I'm doing now. I'm able to gain a deeper understanding, which of course with the YouTube video I cannot do. I can't just talk at the YouTube video. I mean, I try, but they never listen.
You start shouting, that you're wrong, you're wrong.
Stop asking me to subscribe. It doesn't
I'm not
work.
going to like the video.
Ask me to like the video, not subscribe to the video, because the research has shown that subscribers aren't actually that important. It's likes and view time. Stop asking me to subscribe. Anyway.
Subscribe. Subscribe to the podcast. Yeah, no. What it's interesting you bring all that up, because the the level of learning we're at is something that Justin Sung has spoken about briefly, and some of the other educational creators, not necessarily just on YouTube, but I've seen most of them on YouTube. They talk about this level of learning, higher level of learning and lower level of learning, higher order thinking, and different things like that. And the relation between lower level and higher level is interesting because everyone seems to say we want to do higher order thinking, we want to do this higher order learning, we need depth of understanding, this, that, and the other, and they try and skip the first however many levels depending on the model or framework that they're talking about. But the way I see it is you can't get to depth until you've seen it. So we need the lower level stuff, like whatever that is. And the way I treat YouTube is it's my lower level. Like if I didn't have YouTube, I wouldn't get as many questions as I did. The reason that I still watch YouTube is because I still want more questions. And when I want to explore something, I stop watching YouTube and go elsewhere. So I think for people that watch content that can give them questions, that's not just YouTube, that's anywhere online. Think to yourself, do I actually want to have more questions or have more things that I want to explore? And if not, then there's no real need to consume that type of content.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm hitting a shift in the business. I think we touched on this in the bonus episode on the YouTube channel if you're listening on the podcast. Around like where my direction is going, and I think I'm finding myself consuming much less because I have a focus and because I know where I'm going now, because I have watch this for a segue, better understanding of myself. I find that, that's good, wasn't it? I feel like I don't necessarily need to find more information at this current time, like especially the shallow. I think I've reached a depth that I wouldn't say comfortable with, because if you're comfortable with something, you really you've not gone deep enough. Especially when it comes to understanding yourself. But once you reach that certain level, and you are understanding of your understanding. I hated that, but I'm not going to use comfortable because you can't be comfortable. If you're comfortable, there's a problem.
You're in a zone of proximal development.
Oh, I was trying to avoid using that. I could have used that.
Not
but...
comfort zone, they're different things.
Oh god, yeah. Yeah, completely different things. I think we need to put that in aside for another episode. Talk about it for ages.
Comfort zone and zone of proximal development, they're different things.
Yeah. I think once you reach that understanding, it's kind of like taking off your training wheels and getting started. An experience that I literally am having right now as I'm reaching a level in my business where I have such a deeper level of where my wants and skill set are and where I want to take the business and what I want to focus on and who I want to work with. It's changed my consumption habits quite considerably.
So my question here, I'm going to try and ask this and make it not really egotistical. But when it comes to your consumption, from my perspective, you've gone deeper when you've become more comfortable in looking into academic research.
Yes.
And it sounds, and the way I perceive like your development, I guess, as an internet academic, a term I like to use, is the more you've gone into the research, the more you now know what you want to know.
Yes.
Because like I say about the YouTube doesn't very well, most social media doesn't very well express the nuances in things. They sort of give you a conclusion. Hey, here's a thing that I found, or here's an experience I had. And there's no science, there's no context, no reference, there's nothing there. So you can't grab something and go, oh, I'm going to go look at that. But when you've got the research, you can find obviously all the references in there, but they bring up other theories, other hypotheses, other topics, limitations, and the rest. And you're like, what's that? What's that? I want to know what that is. And you end up.
Yeah. And I think like since jumping into like internet academia, one question I had from Rebecca, who's my OBM, is why am I doing research? Why are you doing that? And often what I find is once I start diving into the research, I have a better understanding of me. And it's like, oh, that's why I think that way. That's why for me, my academic research is not necessarily in the same direction as you, I don't think. Like for
Probably
me,
overlaps.
Yeah, there's some overlapping points, but for me, it's like once I understand and can integrate what I'm learning from the academia, it also helps me to, in some ways, dismiss the academia and go, no, my personal experience is this. However, I now understand more about that. And it's more of a like, I understand myself more from the contradictions that exist from the internet academia. Often, I think when I first started, when my depth of understanding of academia was so shallow, shall we say, I thought they had the answers and that what they say is fact. But especially when it comes to the brain and neuroscience and how we think and how we feel and how we like the mushy stuff, you can tell me what it's actually called. And the mushy stuff of you right now?
That's literally what I called it in the video that's coming out in 2 days.
All of the mushy stuff does not have an answer. And then when you turn that around and you look externally with courses and programs and workshops and all the stuff that's being released from a business perspective, promising an answer. And that is like my fundamental thing of like, I freaking hate that. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to help you figure it out yourself. Because that's actually what you need. You don't need to be told what to do in many aspects.
I was going to say, we're getting into the next episode right here.
Oh, are we?
Yeah. Answers or advice.
Ah, shit.
Pausing
on that thought.
I was going to say we could talk about that now, but we'd have to come up with another topic for the next episode.
No, but like, I think the power of understanding how you work comes from having a deeper level of understanding, and that understanding comes from varying different places. I think necessarily it's not consuming content multiple times; it's consuming more content when you're first getting started and figuring it out and playing with that. Go on.
So would you say, because this is how I see it, YouTube is more of a quantity, top of the funnel content or social media, whereas I'm going to say academic articles because blog posts, some of them are just as bad as YouTube, some of them worse. But the academic articles or things that have more depth to them are higher quality, so you don't need as much of them, but they can give you more back. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I see it in the same way. There are outliers and exceptions to the rule, as always there is, because context is key. But overall, yes, when I want to, it helps me to go, cool, this is interesting. I don't want to go any further with that now. I'm good.
Yeah, that's one of those things that when we first started speaking about academic research, and you sort of started moving into Sci-Hub and and some other things with research, it was interesting as someone that had obviously been in academic research for 5-6 years, and trying to introduce someone that didn't go to university, doesn't read academics, isn't a self-proclaimed academic, and getting them to read things that are essentially a load of really complicated words and a format that is not easy to read.
No, definitely not.
So my question would be, do you think it's worth people, if people consume lots and lots of content online, do you think it's worth people having a look at academic articles instead of spending like an hour on YouTube, spend an hour reading one paper? Obviously, change those numbers.
Context. I think it depends on the amount. I think if you are consuming for entertainment, well, if you're learning just to have fun of learning something, keep surface, keep on the YouTube. There is nothing wrong with that. But if you're looking for if you want to get more from the time you're spending, then I feel personally, from my perspective, my context, etc., that yes, it is. I find more value from spending an hour reading an in-depth, meta-analysis of something versus watching 50 videos on the same subject. Especially when the 50 videos all are saying the same fucking thing.
And they quote like one popular video, and they all say the same thing. Yeah. I've experienced that. It's interesting you say that, because I also like the fact you use meta-analysis. I'm like, yes, terminology. Just need a systematic review in there as well now. But yeah, it's one of those it's one of those things where, as someone that is biased towards academia, it's interesting to see this evolving landscape with sharing information. Something that I saw in a video recently is, I've been moaning and whining about no one putting references in. And then I saw literally the opposite issue appear in a video where someone had put in loads and loads of references, no context on what the references were about. And some of the references, because I know the reference pool, were absolute rubbish. Like, they were outdated, or they were 2-page summary articles. And I'm like, why have you put that one in there? Why not just put the fundamental one in there? And out of the 26 papers that were cited, only 3 of them were useful. And I'm sitting here thinking, wow, we now have the same issue in academia as we could do in social media. I think that's a nice issue to have, rather than just sitting there going, I have no idea what to do now. Instead, you get a massive to-do list and be like, oh, now I need to pick what to do. I'd much rather the latter than the further. I'd much rather a nice to-do list or something, but I think it's a nice direction. It would just be interesting to see how social media, I don't think it's going to adopt it into mainstream, but how some of the more quality research is moved forward. Because a lot of the podcasts now are using professionals. They're using like doctors that are researching things. They're using PhD students, and they're using more research heavy fact-based information rather than, hey, this is my opinion. I was Huberman Lab, Tom Bilyeu, what's it, the greatest, whatever his name is, thing. I can't remember his thingy. Yeah, the podcast show. But yeah, there's a few of them that are bringing in experts.
Yeah, the show, podcast show. You all know what that is, don't you?
Yeah. There's a guy. It's the greatest something or other. But they're bringing in experts, and it's interesting to see the experts talk. I know Joe Rogan brings in experts as well, but it's not just them doing it now. There are other people, like I would say, like normal, interested, researching people that are being like, hey, this researcher, I don't agree with this, or I have a different opinion, or what about this research? Alexi Guzzi is a perfect example, where he took Matthew Walker's book on science and basically said, hey, no, and then did a whole blog post about just the first chapter and critiqued it, which is what science is about. Not just saying, hey, you're an expert, I'm just going to listen to you because you've got some letters after your name or before your name. It's critiquing it, which I'm excited to see move forward.
Yeah, that I think it's either today or next week. I have a podcast talking about experts. I recorded it previously. It's going out this week around expertise and why experts only are an expert of what they know. And it's like, because often we give too much, like, especially in the realm of productivity and business advice, we give too much away to the experts. We kind of outsource our responsibility to experts.
So I got a question for you, because this is something that I'm still struggling with in my mind. It's one of those things I was like, I don't like that, but I don't know why I'm going to box it. So I figured I'd bring it up. When individuals reference an expert and say, this expert says this thing, but doesn't give a counter argument or doesn't give context as to their research, their backing or anything, do you think that increases the depth and quality of the video or piece of content?
Depends.
Of course, give me context. I knew that's going to be the answer. It's just like, why, how, where?
I find it more valuable when there is a critique or there is a conversation or an interpretation from the person speaking. I enjoy people's interpretation of the expertise, which is what I'm trying to do with my work, is give more interpretations versus just spouting out the language. Because, you know, let's be honest, there are, apart from this lovely little community we have here, there are a few people who want to learn about, meta-analysis and that other word you said that I'm not going to say just to spite you, so you don't have it.
Systematic review.
Like, that scares people. Like, when I was working on the marketing for my business, there was conversation around like person-centered productivity. And I reached out to basically my ideal audience, and the response was, I feel stupid. I can't, like, I don't understand what that is, so I just won't come along and I won't ask questions and I won't, like, I feel like that you're beyond me. When really, for my marketing purposes, I want to be on the same wavelength. Like, a lot of the feedback that I've received from our work together and my podcast and the products that I have is that we are a voice holding a conversation, and they're a part of the conversation, which I think I never want to lose. Instead of me being seen as an expert that's out of reach and cannot be spoken to, I never want to be seen that way. If it means I cannot be an expert, then I cannot be an expert. I don't give a crap. Like, for me, the expertise is secondary from the conversation, from the perspectives of the experts, which I find more valuable. Rounding it back off to your question, sorry, I was going on a little tangent there. Like, I'm more interested in the perspective of the person reaching, like, mentioning the expert rather than the expert itself. If I want the expert, like what he says, which I never do because I don't want it, because whatever. Often I just don't. I will go there myself. I want your perspective, and then I can choose whether to go deeper.
Yeah, that's it was a similar thought to me. Obviously, in my videos, that's what I try and do. I share what the science says, and then obviously my blue self sort of sums it up much more simply. Like, I prefer being the orange me because that's me sharing what I know and understand. But I recognize that my audience are like, yeah, what the fuck does that mean? Because I was the same. It's the blue me is kind of like the me before I knew what orange me knows. And that's what irritates me sometimes about these people that say, hey, here's a quote thing. Because I'm like, why, how, where? I don't get the
Why
link.
have
I
you
don't get the
provided
connection.
this? What does that matter? Why is that important? Why did you choose that? What was there something else that you missed that you could have picked up on? Like, it was like, give me the context of what you're giving me, which is what I'm always doing with my clients. Whether they get driven up the wall from it, it's like, I'm asking you this question because I want to know this. Because giving that clarification and giving that, like, understanding means what often happens when you're dealing with incredibly smart people, which business owners are incredibly smart. It's like they're trying to analyze what you're saying and why you're saying it. For some people, they don't. Of course not. But giving context always puts people, I feel, always puts people at ease. That's empathizing with someone and giving them context as well as giving them permission to go, hey, this is a thing. And when I'm wrong, that's even better because as far as they're concerned, I'm not wrong. I just gave the wrong context.
So related to something you brought up a second ago, and I'm gonna relate this to some research as well because we're talking about it. Muller and Mayo both talk about multimedia learning, and their research mainly is in misconceptions. I don't know whether you're familiar with the research, but they mainly look at misconceptions. However, what they also look at, because it's qualitative study, they also look at what the students thought before, after, during all the testing. And something that was kind of obvious to most people that have been at school, which is most of us, people don't ask questions, but we have loads of questions. And we don't ask questions typically because either we don't want to look silly, or we don't know if it's a right question or the right time to ask the question, but we would want someone to ask the question. And what Mayo and Muller found in their research is sharing misconceptions in videos is like, one, obviously sharing the misconceptions so people don't misunderstand, but two, it's also answering questions people may have in their head without them needing to ask it, which is what I've attempted to do with my video, with me sort of the blue person being like, what about this? And me going, yes. So if someone has a question, I'm confirming the question they have in their head without them actually asking it. So it's interesting that you sort of mentioned that people have questions, but they don't know whether to answer, to ask, how to ask.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, especially from a business perspective, I remember being very concerned of asking questions because I looked up to the people I looked up to until a certain point, and that was due to a lack of understanding of myself. A lot of issues as it stems in business context, around imposter syndrome, around that lack of confidence in yourself, comes not because you're broken or there's something wrong with you or you're disordered necessarily, but because you don't have the understanding of yourself, of who you are, yourself, not yourself, yourself, the person you are, the soul, the spirit, the brain, the whatever you want to call it, and all the
Extended
pieces all
cognition.
together. Extended cognition, yeah, exactly. Just stop, because then we go down that rabbit hole again. I'm constantly having to pull myself out of that, and then every single time I experience extended cognition, I'm just like, oh, this is just so much easier, and I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Right, I'm going to say something now. That right there is the epitome of spaced repetition. Like you've done some research, you've experienced it, and then you're recognizing it in the real world, which is you recalling and recognizing the information at a different point in time.
It's not about fucking flashcards.
Thank you. I can't stand, because it's like almost synonymous on YouTube. Active recall, spaced repetition, Anki flashcards, Anki flashcards. Fuck off with your bloody flashcards. I didn't use any, and I don't use them. I made a thingy in Notion because it was cool. Did I use it? Rarely. And when I did use it, it was just to see if it worked.
However, let's actually pull that back, pull behind the
Yeah.
curtain. The reason why is because you know how you work.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening there, I infer,
Oh,
is
look at
you
you
don't.
using words.
I do actually use quite a lot of words. I've just removed them because I'm so used to people going, what?
I do that in my videos. That's the blue me. What? What?
Like, I can infer that they don't have the confidence in their own natural spaced repetition. The thing I find just so fascinating with all these tips. Oh, we're gonna go on to the next episode. Okay, I'm gonna hold that thought because it does go into the next episode.
Okay, I will come in then and bring in another, not necessarily caveat, but another point to make with understanding, is prior knowledge. You mentioned expertise, and expertise in a specific context, and depending on your definition of expertise, I've got a note on it, so have a look if you want. But expertise,
I will.
expertise typically, like you say, is in a context, and that's because of the prior knowledge of the individual. Because if the prior knowledge of the individual, taking it from a sports perspective, if you're a sports coach, that doesn't mean you have expertise in sports coaching. It means you have expertise in the sport and the age group and the gender, because it also differs, and the size of group. You have expertise in all of like that small area. When you then go to coaching conferences in sports coaching anyway, most of the time the educators have worked in one or two contexts, and other people in the course, maybe, so the UK coaching conference I went to before COVID, the people that were talking, they were talking about general coaching, but in the room you had netball, rugby, football, cricket, like there were loads of different sports, loads of different genders, age groups, and the rest of it. So the presenter's expertise was useful, but not as useful as it could have been if they had expertise in our context. So the prior knowledge they had impacted how much prior knowledge is actually useful for us, which obviously relates to your expertise example and understanding. Because if the person that is sharing their expertise doesn't have similar prior knowledge or relatable knowledge to your context, then it's going to be, one, harder for you to consume because you're going to have to use a lot of mental load to relate it. And two, John's bouncing on his chair.
Yeah, I have thoughts. I have loads of thoughts. Let's put this in a business context.
Yes.
There are a small group of people who go on about how social media is rubbish and you shouldn't market on social media and you don't need to market on social media. Look at me, I've got a 6-7 figure business without marketing on social media. There is and I'm going to teach you how to not market on social media. No. I do not like social media. I do not enjoy it. Not really. The standard marketing shit. But
GIFs on Twitter.
Huh?
GIFs on Twitter or GIFs?
Yeah. GIFs, please. GIFs, not GIFs.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, you're all wrong if you say that GIF is GIF. No, you're wrong. Get out. That, and also pineapple does belong on pizza.
Yes, it does. I'm glad I found someone else.
You lot can all get out. Just get out. Often when people say, oh, we don't need to be on social media, they've spent nearly like 5-6 years on social media and they have a following. Once you reach a certain point, once you reach a certain threshold, no, you don't need to be on social media. If your plan is not to grow, or you don't have a need to grow to new audiences, and you have a referral network which is not needed to be on socials, then no, you don't. Otherwise, I'm sorry, if you want to connect with multiple people and you don't want to go network events and all that stuff, yes, you do. It is really interesting how you have these people you've got people who say you don't need to go to networking events anymore, and then you've got on the other side people saying you don't need to do social media anymore. You've got to do one.
Something I would say about social media, obviously I'm in favor of social media because I use it a lot. But to access conversations with people or to access certain people, it's much easier and less formal to send something over social media, whether that's a DM or just mention them in something. It's more likely, from my experience anyway, you're going to get a response from someone if you've shown on social media that you're interested in, I don't know, some of the content they've shared or some of the information they've shared, a book they've written or something, and you're publicly sharing their work whilst introducing yourself to them. That's how I've done it. Whenever I want to talk to an academic, most of the time I've listened to a podcast of theirs or listened to or read an article, read a book or whatever, and I'm like, I really enjoyed this book from so-and-so, mention the person, then they'll like it. Once they've liked it, they've acknowledged that I obviously exist, and then you have a starting point to a conversation rather than saying, hi, there's this thing, and this thing. And on social media, obviously, if you're interested in someone's work, likely there is a likely chance that other people are also interested in their work. So people that you may not even have thought about would then contact you because they've seen that you've shared some of their work. And that's happened to me a couple of times. I've shared some podcast episodes of people, and people that listen to that podcast as well have come over to me and be like, oh, I didn't realize you listened to this, and this stuff that you're doing is really interesting. And they've asked me questions about Obsidian when they come from sports coaching. And I'm like, wow, okay, because they listened to a podcast that I shared about. Social media gives you that.
And this is the thing. I get really frustrated when we have experts giving blanket advice that just doesn't give any context. It ruins it. It makes business far harder, and then the business owner is left thinking that they're doing everything wrong because they're told not to do something, then they're told to do something, and then they've got conflicting advice. So guess what? They make no steps. They're overwhelmed, they're stressed, they don't know where to go, they don't know how to start, they feel like there's something wrong with them, and then they just quit because quitting is easier.
Oh
And
yeah.
that annoys me.
I was going to say we could probably close the episode out there, just like and cut.
Ping!
Or is it pang? I don't know.
No. No, it's never peng. No, it's just not.
Oh, I had to bring it up, but yeah, I've really enjoyed this episode. We're not going to do a word of the episode because we kind of felt like, one, it was unneeded, and two, it would have been unfair because I'm doing a PhD in understanding, and that would be the most appropriate word, and it would kind of be pointless to do a meaning of a word when I've done PhD research for the last 3 months about it, and John's not.
Yeah. It would just basically be him talking and me going, yeah, 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 I like that. I mean, pretty much is that anyway, to be fair.
You missed the, oh, wait, what was that? I'm going to research that later. I'm going to read that later. I'm going to read that later.
Yeah, all of that. Or I just have the Mo's now. It's just like, oh, cool, I'm going to go through the Mo's. Oh, this is cool. Oh, that's really interesting. Oh, that's nice. Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I'll just do that.
Yeah. What did you think of the Mo's? I don't know which one you
I
read.
ain't ready yet.
I was going to say.
I started reading it and then kids needed me. I'm going to put it on my, when I'm away for my holiday next week.
Right, cool.
Which
one, the first or the second? Because the second one's bigger than the first.
Both. I'll have more time. I won't be working.
You're going to go through both. Good luck. Like I went like each of the articles that I go through for the Mo's, even though it looks fairly simple because there's only like 4 or 5 pages an article, like all the references, I've looked at all the references that I reference in those articles. It's not oh yeah, I'll just bung that in there. Like I've looked at the abstract and conclusion of all the references at least. Sometimes I then add them. So, but yeah, you'll probably get to a point and be like, oh, that's a really interesting point. Completely forget you've got the rest of the Mo's to read. Go down a rabbit hole.
Oh yeah, I completely know that's happening. That's why I want to dedicate a good amount of time, because the last time I read a really in-depth article, I was there like for 4 hours. At that point, I was time tracking properly. I was just like, oh, 4 hours have gone. Oh, it's 10 o'clock. Oh, I'm starving. Oops.
Yes. So the Mo's is like an index page for you to go, right, I want to waste a couple of hours, or I'm going to spend some hours just reading some stuff. Let's go there.
It's just like, ooh, a mush-bush menu of delicious things. Let's go. Oh, yes, please. Thank you. Goodbye. See you all later. Bye. 4 hours later.
Oh, dear. Right. So, next episode, we're going to be talking about answers or advice. So,
God, I can't wait for that one.
Yeah, so for those of you listening to this one, it will be next week, but John and I are going to talk about it now. So it's going to be fun, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.